For 16 months now, I'm asking you this question about the transposition of EU Directive Regulation 598/14 by either primary legislation or statutory instrument. It's a critically important issue for residents affected by nighttime noise around Dublin Airport, particularly in the context of the new runway and the impact of sleep disruption and so on of noise. Can you bring any clarity? Are you bringing in legislation? When are you bringing it in? Or is it a statutory instrument? Where are we going with this?
Minister. I'm sorry, Deputy. This is the second time I've had to apologise to you. This particular issue is not yet resolved. And it should have been resolved, and we hope to resolve it much earlier than this, and we've had a few false dawns. And let me just tell you that in anticipation of your question, I met the Attorney-General yesterday on this particular issue, asking what was happening, and I got a reply from him this morning, which says, I met with both Parliamentary Council and Advisory Council who are dealing with the draft regulations this afternoon. That's yesterday afternoon. The up-to-date position is that Parliamentary Council expects to finalise the 7th and hopefully final draft of the regulations this evening. That's yesterday evening. Advisory Council will then review the 7th draft and expects to revert to your department with that draft by the end of this week, with a view to arranging a meeting to finalise it next week. I hope the above is of assistance, and please telephone if you wish to discuss further, which I will be taking him up on that particular offer. The statutory instrument to give effect to EU Regulation 598/14, which deals with the regulation of aircraft transport noise emissions, is not yet in place, much against my expectations and my hopes. I fully expected that it would have been by now. It is a source of equal frustration to me as it is to the Deputy. As I said, I spoke with the new Attorney-General yesterday morning, and he has assured me that the matter is now being given top priority in his office. I can assure the Deputy that it will continue to be treated as a top priority issue for my officials. As you know, the entry into force of EU Regulation 598/2014 marks a significant change in the way aircraft noise emissions are managed throughout Europe, and the statutory amendments required in Irish law to give effect to it are complex. Without going into the very detailed and technical legal issues at play, which are a matter of ongoing work amongst my official and the attorneys, lawyers and parliamentary draftsmen, there are two areas that are taking more time to get right than was imagined at the outset. Firstly, the issue of independence of the new noise regulatory body. There is broad agreement that the IAA is best positioned to take on this role, and so to do it at the highest standard of professional competence. It has a strong and internationally verified track record in the area of aviation safety and inspection, functions which it already has legal responsibility for. Making it responsible for noise regulation makes sense, but the legal intricacies regarding making it the competent authority for the purpose of EU noise regulation involves ensuring that the noise regulation function is fully and demonstrably independent of all activities carried out by the authority. The second area of focus is ensuring that there is clarity about how environmental impact evaluation will work into the future, and making sure that there is clear delineation in the roles of relevant bodies, including the noise regulator, the local authority and board prolonged.
Thank you, Minister. The balance of the reply will be recorded. Deputy Daly.
I mean, it goes without saying that it is absolutely shocking that this situation hasn't been resolved before now, and I'm still not clear from your answer, Minister, whether we're talking about just a statutory instrument or whether we're talking about primary legislation. If we could even have clarity on that, it might be some assurance to residents. Now, this regulation, as you've said yourself, and directive, is supposed to improve the position for residents who are already living with the impact of sleep deprivation, annoyance with noise, and they know that this directive is being put in place at a time when the DAA are quite open about their attempts to undermine the existing restrictions on night flights, which are going to, if it's allowed to happen, is going to have an incredibly negative impact on their lives. So I hear what you're saying about the need for clarity on the independence of the IAA, but can you tell us, is it going to be primary legislation? Can we at least have interest on that? And what about the idea of the Forum Residents Group working with the collaborative working group linked to the IAA? Has that been set up, or is that still awaiting the dictates of the Attorney-General as well?
Troy.
Thank you, Minister, are you not at all embarrassed coming in, given the answer that you've given in relation to this question? Because just like Deputy Daly, I have raised this issue consistently for the last 12 months. And consistently, question time after question time after question time, a resolution is imminent. But that resolution hasn't come to bear. And as a consequence of that, the residents in the area are totally and utterly frustrated, as you claim you are yourself. The only difficulty is the residents can't do anything about it. You can. But as well as that, you are actually stunting growth at the airport. I used the airport in the last number of days, and on return flight, the plane had to circle for 15 minutes because there was capacity issues on the existing runway. Now, I would advise you, Minister, it may be better for you to concentrate on the legislation under your own remit in the Department of Transport, and if you are, this matter could be resolved at this stage.
Please.
It could always depend on you, Deputy Troy, to come in at the back of a question where you thought there was vulnerabilities. But you didn't ask the question yourself. But I will certainly answer Deputy Daly as fully as I can.
Please, Deputy. Yes, he is, and let the Minister answer now.
Yeah, of course you're permitted to do lots of things. I'm just commenting on the opportunities which you take and the initiatives you take. And it's a pity you didn't ask it yourself or think about it. Yeah, of course, I'm embarrassed by this, Deputy Daly. I am. I am embarrassed by this. I'm acutely embarrassed by this because I think it is. And you're right. The 16 months you've been asking, you've probably been asking since before I came into office. But the answer I give you is this: if it's with the lawyers, it's with the lawyers. I am harassing the Attorney-General, as you can see from the letter coming back, to produce an answer. I cannot take precipitate measures when the Attorney-General is making a decision which is of this importance. It is very, very important that we get this right. For the sake of the runway, for the sake of the people that you refer to, the residents you refer to, and for the sake of the nation. And whereas it may seem to be a difficult legal problem which is delaying everything, if we get this wrong, we will be in an awful lot of trouble. And the answer is, yeah, we're looking still at a statutory instrument. The original legal advice to the Attorney-General was that the designation of the competent authority was something to be done using secondary legislation. And that is what we are endeavouring to do.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Daly to conclude.
I'm a bit struck dumb by the last point. So you're saying clearly now that there's going to be no primary legislation. You're not saying that. Okay. Well, again, that's a huge problem. I mean, this is completely unacceptable. We're talking about a draft being finalised by the end of the week, but I still don't know what that draft is about. Is it the regulations to deal with a statutory instrument, or is it guidance for primary legislation? I mean, it is already the situation that Dublin Airport has one of the most relaxed set of restrictions for noise, and the residents are suffering from that. They're also acutely aware of the statements by the DAA that once this body gets up and running, the DAA intends to move to lift the nighttime restrictions on flights linked to the new runway. The residents aren't opposed to the new runway, but they just want it balanced with their quality of life. Out there on the ground, there's a road network that's in upheaval, problems in the airport. You can see it happening on the ground, yet the legislation hasn't caught up, and it is unacceptable. And I would ask the Minister if we could be given copies of that information as soon as possible towards the weekend. And again, can I beg for clarity on legislation or statutory instrument, or can we even say that one way or another? It has to be sorted before the recess.
Please.
It should be sorted before the recess. I agree, and I will. Yes, the moment I get that, I will let you know. I can assure you of that. Provided I get it, well, I'll let you know the moment I do, because I'm aware of the fact that you can't ask another question for a long time, and so I'll let you know immediately. On the issue of whether it's going to be secondary or primary legislation, let me say, if the AGs advise that primary legislation is required to finalise any aspects, the introduction of such legislation in the Oireachtas is unlikely to occur in the short term. My immediate focus is on the finalisation of the necessary secondary legislation to give effect to the provisions of the new EU regulation. And as you know, the primary legislation will focus, if there is any, on the longer-term strategies like planning, superseding decisions of and other things like that. The statutory instrument will concentrate on the need to set up the structures necessary to set up the competent authority. We don't know yet, but the concentration is on getting the statutory instrument out as soon as possible.